In this chapter, I'm going to show you how to control the twist along the spinal column. This is going to require yet more point helpers. But I've always said it doesn't matter how many point helpers you have in a rig, as long as they're there for a purpose and a reason. We're going to be using these ones that are actually set along the path constraint initially as an orientation control based on the rotation of our control objects. What we're first going to do is take each of these objects that are on the path constraint and constrain them to their corresponding control. And once again, the two that are up in the middle of the back, they will be mixed between these two controls for their orientation. So to orientation constraint, and you can see it flip around so that it's in the direction of this object. If I go to local, you'll see that it's aligned to it on a local axis now. The next one, this will be 100% to this one. I'll do the top one. It'll be 100% to the top one. Next one down, we're going to do 66.5 to here and 33.5 to here. So 66.5, whoops. $33.5. And the other way around, 66.5 to the bottom and 33.5 to the top. Now again, you can play around with these values and get different results. Now you'll notice when I rotate these controls, it's actually rotating these point helpers now instead of just moving them. This means when I go to twist, I'm actually getting a result of each one twist a little more down the spine. If I twist from the center, you can see they're twisting off up the spine. This way I'm getting a twist basically from the middle of the back up and down, which we couldn't have achieved before if we'd used the built-in spline IK modifier. The next step is to add a few more point helpers first to look at so that we know they're actually out in space and something to look at. Once again, I'm going to use a point helper, and let's change the display to just a center marker this time, and make sure that we have things that are all aligned properly. I'm going to align it orientationally to the one it's going to be linked to. So I'm going to set this point helper out here, and this point helper is going to get linked to this point helper, so that when this one rotates, it's moving this around in space now. So you can see that this point helper is rotating around with it. I've set it up here somewhere because this is going to control the up node of this bone. Let's make a few more of these. And I'm going to link this one to this helper. I'm going to link this one to this helper. And one more for the bottom. So now you can see when we again rotate it, all those little point helpers are moving out in space now. The next step is to set the up node of each of the bones. Let's just make sure we get our bones orientated the right way. Easiest way to do that is just turn on a front fin. And right off the bat you can see that one of our bones is actually the opposite way around. That's because we're set on world coordinates right now. all of these are leaning towards the right. This one's leaning towards the left, and you can see that it's flipped around the opposite direction even though it's using the same settings. Back to our motion panel with the bottom bone picked. I'm going to say world off, node. I'm going to pick that node. This one now, world off, pick the node. And flip it back over so it's the right way around. Actually, one of the things I need to do is up node control, look at. So sorry, it did flip it over the right way, so I was wrong there. I'll leave the flip on. And look at, and I'll leave that flip on so it ends up the right way around. So what's happening now is the twist along the length of this is looking at this little point helper here. If I actually move just this point helper, you can see that I can twist that bone around its length. Same with this point helper, we'll control this bone now. We'll do that to each of them and set up node control to look at, up node control to look at. We now have a system that the bones can't twist wildly. They'll always twist wherever they're pointing at one of these. This gives you some extra control actually because you can actually go in and adjust a twist on a given bone by moving this point helper around if you had to during an animation. If it's set up correctly, you really shouldn't have to. But certainly if you got yourself into a really strange pose where there was some flipping happening in a bone, you can easily correct it by just animating one of these point helpers. So now you can see that the bones rotate and bend and flex nicely with the whole system. If all three of the controls move, the entire spinal column moves. So to make sure that the entire spine moves when the waist moves, we can link all three controls to it. We now need to do a test, and you'll notice that we're actually getting some strange results. Those strange results are due to the fact that some of these objects are only position constrained and are not rotating with the objects the way we'd expect. An example is here. This object is directly linked to this one. This object is only position constrained between here and here. So this object doesn't actually rotate it when I rotate the character's body. You can see that happen. It stays aligned to world space, even though the rest of the rig is rotating. For that reason, this is causing a problem because it's actually pulling on the spinal column. This means we can't rotate the character around. We wouldn't even be able to rotate our character sideways. To alleviate this, what we need to do is simply take these objects that have been position constrained and link them up to our main waist control. The position constraint overrides any positional change on this object. They will only follow these two, this one and this one. But now when it rotates, they'll actually rotate and keep their correct orientation. So you can see that the spine isn't changing shape as I rotate the main control around the waist anymore. For the legs, we can take the top of the two leg bones and link it into a number of things. One might be the spinal column at the very bottom, or the control object, or one of the point helpers at the base. This would appear to be more what we want, is linking it directly to the bone. This can get us some strange results when we move it forward and backwards, though. So another thing I've found works well is actually directly linking up to the point helper instead and they don't tend to try and rotate with the bone, forcing the legs into some strange positions where you don't want them to be. This also means that when you rotate the hips, you can swing the hips down and forward and the bone's not moving. So some of the rotation can actually still work in this bottom control, even though we haven't set it up like the other ones. This is a pretty good spline IK control now. Something I'll cover in an advanced tutorial is how to get a localized twist along the spinal column. As you see right now, I'm actually changing the position of a lot of the bones when I rotate it. With further setup, you can get it so it twists along its length.